right, good evening. My name is Omari Salisbury, Converge Media. I'm joined by Bobbie Stills. What's up, Bobby?
Good evening, Omari Salisbury. Good morning, good afternoon, viewers. Twice,
Good.
two in one day, two in one day.
Two for you. This is four for me, man.
I'm,
This
I'm
is
not, I'm not quite as big as you yet.
man. I'm just saying. So, we just did a coronavirus update show a little while ago. But this one was impromptu, so I appreciate you hopping on with me, Bobby. And we also got Kevin Schofield from SEC Insights. You want to talk about what happened in federal court today? Man, it seems like we just can't get away from this Cal Anderson Park. I mean, you live in the neighborhood, but jeez.
Yeah, this is, I don't know. There's a lot of complaints from some city people, business owners, some residents in the neighborhood. But the thing about it is there's not very many businesses open up here. There's not a lot of activity going on with a lot of businesses and employees working in the neighborhood because everything's shut down because of the coronavirus. So it's not like that park is even really being would be even be used that much, which is something that I think about a lot too. So that's what I'm saying is
All right.
usually I'd be
Well,
out walking through that park all the time, but
right.
since there's not a lot of activity.
All right. Well, we got about an hour here, so you know what I'm saying. Let's look at all the issues and different perspectives. There's perspectives of people. There's also residents in the neighborhood who clearly they want the park clear. They want to be able to activate in the park. There's also residents right there, especially ones who live closer to Cal Anderson Park. A lot of people there who are supportive of what's going on and totally against the sweeps. But we will start with this morning. Got a nice little banner here. Boom. What happened this morning? So, for a lot of people know for sure. That the park didn't get swept, but I got out there about 6:30 this morning, and 6:30 this morning, it was already a lot of people who were filtering into the park. Clearly, a lot of whether you call them supporters, housing advocates, whatever title you want to put on them, protesters. People started filtering into the park around 6:30 in preparation of the police coming to sweep the park at 7:30 this morning. Of course, that didn't materialize. What are some of the things you noticed when you arrived over to the park this morning, Bobby?
Like you said, it was a mixed bag of different people out there. People from different organizations, a lot of mutual aid being set up, people coming from out of town. I know that a lot of the protesters or activists had dug in to that area of Cal Anderson Park overnight and really fortified that section, preparing for the sweep. They also planned on being there a long time. Riot Kitchen came through, was making banana pancakes. It really called back to the days of Chop. Then there was a lot of outreach that started showing up a little bit later that day. Um, but I know that there's more than just the issue of homelessness surrounding this park matter. There's still people that have are on the side of defunding SPD. There's a lot of people that are coronavirus. There's a lot of different issues surrounding things. I just think this is the boiling point. This is the flashpoint of where a lot of the energy is focused. Is this main spot, and so it's a way for a lot of these different cross sections of groups to intersect.
Right, and when Kevin Schofield said an interesting term that was actually used in court today, and I hope I don't get it wrong, but if I do, you can correct me. They went to court and they called it a protester encampment. I don't think that in court it was referred to as a homeless encampment, but I'll let Kevin clear that up for us here in a little bit when we bring him on. Or you could drop it in the comment, Kevin, if you're back there. I know he'll type. Okay, yeah, Kevin Schofield said it in court today in federal court. It was actually referred to as the plaintiff by the plaintiff's lawyers as a protest encampment. So when you say that a mixed bag of people down there, everything from homeless advocates, demonstrators, activists, protesters in federal court, the plaintiff's lawyer referred to it as a protest encampment. I got one or two pictures here. Let's see if I can find them. Jay Gravbrot was on the ground this morning. And 11th Avenue in on Pine, that's 11th and Pine right there. That was blocked off. And then of course we saw the King County Sheriff, the helicopter buzzing around.
The
Uh,
bird.
yeah, man, the ghetto bird.
Well,
It's
you
been
put the tweet out last night. You put the tweet out last night with I'm not sure was it a video or a picture, but they were out there with the spotlight on the park doing their surveillance. So they're back there today.
right, right, definitely. And so what we saw, so big thing is, okay, one, the area of the park that's fortified is more fortified. Like last night, people got busy and definitely entrenched and lots of mutual aid, stuff like that. Two, although the police made a short demonstration at 7:30, they drove around the park with their lights on. I think they did that 2 or 3 times, tweeted that out once. Saw basically nothing from the Seattle Police Department today over at Cal Anderson Park. So really, no sweep. Three, um, some of that call to action that we see that people put out into the public asking for people to come to the park, people came to the park. So that's kind of what we saw there. But I want to talk about how local politicians react to the sweep. And who we saw out there early in person was King County Council member Gurmai Zahalai, who actually represents the Central District, the South End, and Skyway. And this is a shot right here from the council member's Instagram. And this is a banner that was up there on the fence at Cal Anderson Park. Without shelter, people die. So we saw something from him, and then also council member Mosqueda released a statement here. I mean, I'm directing all by myself back here today.
You're doing great.
Cecilia
You're
said,
doing great. Oh, you're doing
yeah,
great.
man, you know what I'm saying? So Mosqueda, I'll just read something here from what Mosqueda said. I remain concerned with the planned removal and urge first public placement in non-congregate shelter options in order to be in compliance with current public health CDC guidelines. We need to place folks in available housing and appropriate shelter options like the additional tiny houses and hotel rooms authorized in the budget that meet the demographic needs of those in an encampment. City parks represent public space and healthy communities and should be usable by all. And we must balance access to this public health resource with the public health crisis to not put at risk entire community health. And so that was response from Mosqueda, who that was released through City Hall. And of course, like I said, we saw King County Council member Gurmai Zahalai there at Cal Anderson Park this morning, right at 7:30. Didn't see any other local elected officials there. Also, didn't see anything, and I hadn't scanned it. I'll scan it throughout the show, but I didn't see anything from Councilmember Sawant and District 3. That's the council member's district right there in Cal Anderson Park.
I know that there was a couple people that we had actually spoke with that actually asked where our councilwoman was at. Me and you had a conversation. We spoke a lot about lack of leadership when it comes to some of these issues and being out there. And we actually thought it was a perfect time for somebody to come out there, one of our leaders to come out there and actually talk to the group. When I saw the Zawahai come out there, I was happy to see him. I'm happy to see any leader out there to talk to the community. And I don't think that anytime anybody's come out there, I don't really think they've faced a backlash or um, had any kind of confrontations. We know that some of the news, some of the other media outlets actually have some issues there. But altogether, it was pretty peaceful out there today, and I would have liked to see some leadership step up and come out there and address the issue face to face with some of the activists.
Yeah, well, I mean, with any district in the city, no matter what district it is, happens to be a District 3. This is your district, and that is actually your council member. So we'll see if Council Member Sawant makes any statement or comes out there to Cal Anderson Park or meets with anybody who's out there. She did tweet earlier today on the council member's Twitter here, and yeah, let me see here. it's about big corporations. So I just wanted to double check. I didn't want to just say like, yeah, we haven't heard from the council member, but yeah,
I do know that that the protesters, activists, community at Cal Anderson Park, they have done their side, and they have called on all the leaders, and their voicemail boxes are full at the moment, I believe. So that, they've done their side of it. Now it's on the leadership side to answer all those voicemails.
right, right. And for those of you just joining us, we're going to be joined here in a little bit by Kevin Schofield at SCC Insight, so we can talk about what occurred in the federal courts today, downtown. I mean, man, they took this to court. It got heard in front of Judge Jones. Some of you guys might remember Judge Jones. He's the same one that heard the ACLU case against the city that was just ruled on, found the city in contempt. But we'll be talking to Kevin Schofield about that. So talking to all sides of this issue here. Of course, you have people in the park, and the thing is, I tweeted last night. I was like, man, this is complex, and it's too complex for Twitter. So I'm glad maybe people that follow me on Twitter, you're right here, so I can talk about it because we've been on this since August, on and off. You live right there, so clearly you've been on it one way or another. But since the shelter house first popped up, people were actually literally begging for city assistance, and which was very slow to come there in the beginning. And a lot of community people, many of them who are still there, did outreach themselves on a lot of the homeless people that were there in the park, and actually placed people themselves and found what resources. And then what you found was like people were placed, but then more people would come to the park because they heard that services were being offered there, or different kinds of reasons. But it isn't like there's very few people there that are in the park that were there in August, right?
Yeah, let me go ahead and just say this too. I'll reiterate this from this morning, and you just touched a little bit on it right there. Is that a lot of the groundwork, the footwork being done in that park with some of the you know unhoused, unsheltered people in that area. They've actually been contacted by community members, people that come from that neighborhood that work with those people. These are not people that work for any organizations or nonprofits. They're not paid by the city. They do it every day, and it's been those people that have really been in contact and been the bridge builder in between some of the outreach services and human services uh, organizers to help find these people housing. And I did want to say that, since we have covered that, since back in August, a lot of those people have been sheltered or found temporary housing or been put in permanent housing. And like you said, new people keep showing up, maybe because they've heard or they've been in contact with some of these community members. But what I do want to say is that a lot of people in that park have been placed into temporary housing or permanent housing, but right now they don't have a choice as to where they want to go. So that park is just it's the people in there that don't want to go to the places that are being offered to them, and or they just haven't been connected to the right services. So that's kind of where a lot of the protesters or activists are upset about, is actually getting those people connected to services.
Right. And I know you have connections at HSD and a few other people. And so I think you talked to them today, but I know that early on in this process, it's true that the city was sending people out there, but the dots they weren't able to take something from A to Z, as in like interact with someone and then get them out. Now, my understanding is the city has improved their process maybe over time, but I know not that long ago, that was the issue that some of the people faced.
Yeah, there's a lot of these organizations are out there, and they're not taking the steps from A to Z. They go out there, do A, B, C, and then they miss everything in the middle. They aren't able to actually check in. They're not caseworkers. You know what I'm saying? They go out there and they rely on the community because you can't keep track of all these people. Some people have mental issues, drug addiction. They disappear for weeks on end, but they're always unsheltered or unhoused. So if they don't have a connection to these actual people that are trying to help them, there's nothing that these organizations can do with them, and that's why it takes the people that live around in or around Cal Anderson Park to actually be the dots, to connect the dots between um, a lot of these unsheltered people that need assistance. And I actually got a statement from a Black Action Coalition, which
Well,
is
hold on. We'll,
yeah,
we'll, we'll get to that. We'll get to that here
okay,
in a second when we talk about what other groups are doing. Don't worry.
okay,
I got a banner in there for that too.
yeah,
Um, but before we get to that, what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of give a position of people that are there homeless or unsheltered in the park, and their advocates that are out there, because the next is I have a statement or an email that was sent to me from Seattle Parks Department. um, and what Seattle Parks Department is saying here. Got a banner for that too. We're moving on up around here. Parks. Now I'll read this. It's hard to read on the screen, so I'll read it to you guys. Seattle Parks and Recreation is preparing to reopen Cal Anderson Park to neighbors and park visitors. They're currently assessing the site and have created a plan for multi-day intensive maintenance and cleaning. On Monday, the city asked individuals currently residing in the park to remove their belongings by Wednesday at 7:30, so Seattle Parks and Recreation could begin maintenance and city workers can prepare to reopen the park. In recent days, additional protesters have moved to Cal Anderson to occupy the park, similar to occupation of the shelter house earlier this year. Recent regular Seattle Parks maintenance efforts have been met with threats of physical violence, which is why Seattle Parks has had to request the assistance of the Seattle Police Department to ensure the safety of park maintenance and other city employees. Individuals have barricaded a portion of the park and intentionally set a fire to a tent. Seattle Fire Department has reported 5 fires in the last month. At Cal Anderson, city contracted outreach workers have been conducting needs assessments, identifying potential service connections, making referrals for those interested in shelter, and offering support to help individuals voluntarily relocate from the park. There are some individuals at the park who are experiencing homelessness, and it's a priority of the city to connect those individuals to shelters or short term assistance for almost a week. Outreach providers have made contact with nearly every individual experiencing homelessness in the park. They're still receiving updates. Some of the stuff they've already put out there, they're saying they've put 17 shelter or hotel referrals, at least 8 individuals relocating from the park. Today there are more. So they're saying that today there are more than 60 shelter beds available, which included youth shelters, basic and enhanced, tiny homes, and adult shelters. And mentions organizations like LEAD and Urban League have additional resources. Today, HSD, Human Services, set up a resource tent outside Cal Anderson Park to coordinate outreach services and were visited by Urban League and Reach. After eggs, rocks, and bricks were thrown at HSD Hope Team members, the resource tent was removed. Thankfully, no employees were injured. The city asked individuals to remove any belongings by today. Seattle Parks expects to begin this work soon to reopen the park. While some may be looking to protest or resist these efforts, the city's goal has been to bring individuals experiencing homelessness inside to safer spaces, including hotels, and partner with community to reopen the park. That was a lot. But that's the statement right there. That's the email that I got from Rachel from Seattle Parks Department. So now that's basically what the city is saying.
yeah. I think this is also another issue that I know activists have with this particular encampment here in Cal Anderson Park, is that these resources and these people have been sent in from these outreach programs, these human services program, but there's also other encampments in or around Seattle where these people need um, these organizations to go in and help them out too. We did see Human League there today. We did see Reach there today. I heard that Lehigh was there today too. Now I'm not going to attest to how much work they were doing because I was with Converge and I was working with you guys, but I know that I saw some of that paperwork. that was handed out and stuff like that, dropped on the ground. They were also told that they were giving out business cards and called to contact some of these places. A lot of these people do not have phones. But that's also where some of the issues, the underlying issues that some of these activists have, is that just up the street, there's another encampment at 15th and Denny. And they're wondering, why is the focal point so much on Cal Anderson? So they think it's somehow connected to Chop Chaz, the defund movement, the protesters. So, they also have an issue with that. So, I'm not sure exactly how true this letter is. But they say there's apparently 2 weeks ago, none of this stuff was available. None of these beds were available. These tiny homes weren't available. These vouchers weren't available. But then all of a sudden, a week when the sweeps are coming, then these groups are activated to go into the park and offer assistance to these people. But it's been cold out. We've had the coronavirus out here, and that's where the issue is happening with some of the protesters and activists and community members as to why now.
Okay, well, it's a lot of pressure. I mean, they say pressure bust pipes. There's pressure on the city, so maybe that's the answer to your question. Why now? And so maybe the city, no matter the if you take the position of no matter what the city has done prior to, like, say today, if the city is like, hey man, you know what, we feel the heat or whatever the motivation is, this X, Y, and Z is available. They're trying to work with people and move them out. I mean, isn't that progress from the city to say, hey, we have space, we're ready to take you?
I think that's a good step forward. I think that it's much needed, and I think it's a step in the right direction. I think a lot of the organizers actually have an issue with it being these nonprofits out there doing it, not the city too. So that is one of the things they've been more vocal about is, they want to see receipts, they want to see data, they want to see numbers as to what's happening with the unsheltered community after they get into the tiny houses, after they get into emergency shelters.
And to be honest with you, before we go on to the next topic here, I think that no matter, especially people who are in the city of Seattle, citizens of the city of Seattle, taxpayers of the city of Seattle, no matter where you fall on the homeless issue, I think that everybody can agree that people want to see transparency, they want to see accountability, they want to see, man, it's a massive investment in homelessness in Seattle. And a lot of what people are saying is that they want to see the end result of these programs and some of everything else that's out there. I don't have a lot to say on it today because I don't have a lot of information, but I do know when talking to people who are like, pro homeless, and people who are like, we need to get rid of the homeless. uh Everybody agrees that they want to see more transparency coming out of the city's investment that it's making in homelessness, and what are the results. I mean, are the agencies that are getting paid, are they delivering? You know what I'm saying? What does success look like for some of the nonprofits? What's their metrics there? What's the benchmark? How do the citizens of Seattle know when they're getting a return on their investment? So um I'll get ready to bring in Kevin here as we go to the next issue here, the Seattle Police Department's position. Good evening, Kevin Schofield, SCC Insight. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? You guys are having a great conversation about this, and it was just, Bobbie, as you're talking about, what you're hearing from activists about, why isn't the city out here doing this? It's really fascinating because what the city council has been saying is they hear over and over again that the navigation team and having other representatives of the city out doing outreach directly was not working, and that there seemed to be this consensus model. This consensus that a better model would be for the city to not be doing outreach directly, but letting third-party providers take care of it, right? So, wow, it sounds like we're still not all on the same page about what should be happening around this, and there's more conversations that need to happen.
I hear a lot of the people that are out there actually the community members out there doing the work is saying, we're doing their jobs for them for free. We're doing the city's job for them. We're carrying the burden on our back. We're the one, hitting the pavement and making the phone calls for these people. And they're tired of it. They're tired of doing this job for free. They're not paid.
I do know this, and speaking of keeping receipts, And we'll put these up tomorrow. I mean, they're already up, but we checked in with Shelter House over almost over a 6 week period. And every time that we'd go up there, we'd hear a story like, a nonprofit came, one guy came, said they'd be back, never came back. You know what I'm saying? Or other people, they left messages. I mean, because early on, some of the people who were there, and they admittedly, and I played the clip earlier today, they admittedly said, man, hey, we're not social workers. We don't know anything, whatever. And so their first thing they did was actually call all the people who said that they deal with these kind of issues. And they said that they had very limited success. And it wasn't until we started running those segments, really, really saying like, hey, well, where is Human Services? Where is Seattle Parks Department? Where are these people? Because I mean, they were calling for the services. So I personally, and now I was in and out of that story over the months, but I personally can tell you that what I saw and experienced there in interviewing people is that, man, it wasn't like, oh, okay, they're dispatching some of the nonprofits and it was, instant activation or whatever. And I mean, the city might have, and some of these groups might have improved over time. I'm not trying to paint everybody with a broad brush, but I do know, and like I said, we'll put the videos up tomorrow. People can see that was their biggest complaint they were having. It's like, man, we're calling everybody. Everybody's on the list. Nobody's responding.
Well, there's clearly a big disconnect here because the city is paying a lot of money to a bunch of outreach organizations to be out there on the streets taking care of this. And so, yeah, it sounds like we need, to get better information about where they're actually spending their time.
Exactly. All right. So Seattle Police Department. Now I bring this up because the Seattle Police Department is just something interesting. Now, and talking, informally over here, talking to the police. I mean, sweeping like a homeless encampment isn't necessarily something that the average, they don't really, it's not high on their scale. The average person, right? And they're like, man, that's something when talking to them, it's not necessarily that they want to do. And since August, they've kind of been pushing it on parks. Like, look, man, you know what? Saying this is parks and this is parks thing. And we saw here in Rachel Skolkin's letter earlier, she said that Seattle Parks and Recreation has had to request the assistance of the Seattle Police Department to ensure the safety of park maintenance. And I bring that up here because Capitol Hill, CapitolHillSeattle.com, Justin Carter, he was, writing this blog earlier, and the Seattle Police Department reached out to him and says SPD has objected to CHS's characterization of the planned sweep. Quote, any action in any city park is done by Seattle Parks Department, not the police department, a spokesperson tells CHS. The Seattle Police Department is always available to assist Parks Department personnel, but they and not the police department are the agency responsible for the parks. We would only be present in a support role to the Parks Department. Man, this kind of sounds like whenever they go to sweep this park, that as opposed to seeing SPD being the first wave to enter the park, that actually Parks Department is supposed to be the first wave to enter the park. And if they meet some resistance or require assistance, then SPD is basically supposed to back them up. I mean, yeah. How do you take that, Kevin?
Yeah, it's sort of it's even broader than that, actually. So, since the navigation team went away, there are no police officers whose job is to deal with sweeps and directly in homeless encampments, right? They are, officially on paper, their role is a supportive role. So if there's a fire at a homeless encampment and the fire department has to go out to somewhere and they don't feel comfortable that it's secure, they may call SPD and say, hey, come out and secure the scene so we can get in there and take care of this fire, right? Or if, Reach or one of the outreach providers wants to go into a site and they don't feel safe doing it, they could call SPD and get back up, right? That's their choice. But SPD isn't at any of those, interventions by default. They have to be called in by the people whose responsibility is to do that, whether it's the Parks Department or the Fire Department or SDOT, if it's, if they're trying to do maintenance on wetlands right next to a street or something like that, that's SDOT property, SPD has to be called in and support, because their job isn't to clean up encampments anymore. But that's the default. We all think, is we're so used to it for so long that this is a thing that SPD goes in and does, right?
Right. And
real quick,
go ahead. I'm just putting it up on screen. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I will say this, a lot of people last time the sweep came through, they had blamed the mayor's office and or SPD, but Seattle Parks actually came forward and said, everything that was taken out of that park was being held by Parks. It was Parks' choice to go in there. They actually were, they're the ones that put out. I actually asked the Parks Department to give me directions on how people can get back their belongings. So yeah, it was not the police department that, it was not their choice to go into that park last time and sweep. It was by Parks' request, and Parks was actually the ones that went in there and gathered up all of the leftover belongings from people.
So, I mean, this is a question that probably none of us can answer. We can only speculate, and I don't want to get too far off topic. But I mean, I think one thing that we see back in August when they were doing the sweeps, right? The first two sweeps. What I said then was like, it looks like people are calling SPD, and when they called the Seattle Police Department, it exposed the gaps in the system, meaning that when the shelter house got up there, they're begging, literally, we got them on video, we need services, we need people, we need help. Nobody showed up, nobody left. They called the police swept the park. But I mean, what that exposed is gaps in the system. You know what I'm saying? And instead of fixing the gaps, a lot of times it's like the issue falls now to the Seattle Police Department, and the Seattle Police Department sweeps people out. And when the Seattle Police Department sweeps people out, there's probably no impetus for people to fix the internal issues.
But this one too, what happened in Cal Anderson, it doesn't sound like it's really the police sweeping people out right now. It sounds like it's the Parks Department doing it.
Well,
but then again, to the people in the park and to citizens around Seattle, is that a distinction without a meaningful difference, right?
Right.
Do they just like city people do them?
I just want to point this. The only reason why I bring this up is, like I said, SPD has gone out of their way. They hit up Justin Carter at CapitolHillSeattle.com to go out of their way to be like, hey man, this isn't us. This is Parks. If Parks calls us, we're obligated to come. But Park ain't our problem. Park is Park's problem. So it's interesting that the Seattle Police Department, made sure to reach out to Justin with this clarification from them. And also, I just want to touch on this briefly because we're talking about the Seattle Police Department, and this came out at 6:30 tonight. And I'm sure you might have a little bit of insight on this, Kevin. But the Seattle Police Department said that they're crowdsourcing feedback from the community for the draft use of force crowd management policies. And basically, it says here, they're doing ongoing critical review, learning things. But as part of consent decree process, SPD is reviewing and revising its crowd control management and use of force policies. These policies are being revised based on internal recommendations from SPD's review board, yada, yada. And people can find this on the Seattle PD Twitter. Just let me read this one section here real quick. Now, SPD is looking for continued feedback from the public and stakeholders. SPD understands that many in the community have questions and concerns about these policies. For purposes of transparency and soliciting feedback from as many community members as possible, and to inform further SPD discussion, SPD is providing these policies in a draft format this time, and they're asking for comments from the community about how they should do crowd management.
This is a story I've been working for a week. In fact, I wasn't paying attention much to what was going on in Cal Anderson because I was working that story all day today, right? It turned into a big deal at the Community Police Commission meeting this morning. So since the beginning of this month, SPD has been quietly circulating to the OPA, to the Office of Inspector General, to the CPC, to the police monitor, to the DOJ, a set of draft changes to their use of force and crowd control policies. And they like doing this stuff really quietly. They like to sending it out and saying and telling these organizations, yeah, don't send this, don't disseminate this to other people. Just kind of look at it yourselves and send us feedback. And the CPC in particular is like, well, like we're responsible for getting, public input onto these things, right? So you're telling us we can't disseminate this and you want feedback by January 8th. Well, that's not really like working for us. So they tried to speed up the conversation, and SPD said, so slowly roll a little bit on this. And in fact, it's really kind of funny because they published those 8 sort of policy documents today. I had them about a week ago, because they're public documents. As soon as they send them to Community Police Commission, like those are public records. I can go get those. So I went and got those. And then I've been trying to sort of piece together what the story is about what's going on with SPD trying to review this. And then finally, after this all kind of blew up this morning in the CPC, I and one other local reporter, Paul Kiefer from Publicola, who also got these things, were both like, well, nobody's seen this stuff and everybody needs to see this because SPD wants feedback really quickly on this. So, we're both sort of committed to publishing this like as soon as possible. So part of the reason that SPD, put this out this afternoon or this evening is because, I'm about, 15 minutes of work away from publishing them on myself because I've been working on it all day today. Right.
Man,
they just beat me to it. They just beat me to it.
Well, and in that case, you guys, as soon as we get off air, make sure sccinsight.com. I'll tweet it out.
I have a longer piece, got analysis of what's in the policies, and you can just go read them yourself. Yeah.
Kevin, got all the good stuff. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was going to say, Kevin, is it now with your piece that you're putting out? Is it going to actually address some of the things that are in that and help people actually navigate through filling out some of those forms? Because I just want to encourage a lot of our viewers and listeners into whether it's positive or negative. You're the community and your voice matters, and to please go and you can't complain unless you're out there actually logging in and giving your feedback.
And one of the things the Community Police Commission is pushing hard on is they actually want to have some public forums on this, right? They're like, giving feedback in a forum isn't enough, right? We need to have some public conversations about because this is it. This is the big deal, right? Use of force, including what less lethal weapons they can use, and crowd control policies. These are the 2 big ones, right? We have to have a public conversation. We're not going to sort of do this quietly where people fill out a form and, these 5 accountability groups give SPD some feedback, they incorporate that, and they send it off to the judge, right? There has to be public conversations about this, and it's great that we have the CPC, and they're really, they stepped up this morning and said we're going to have to push hard to make sure that there are public forums around this. Maybe we have to, if SPD doesn't want to do that with us, we'll talk to the city council because they've got a bunch of infrastructure for doing public forums. But one way or another, we want to have public discussions about these. So I think that's great.
All right, and so I'll put this up again, then we'll move on to what happened in the federal court. So, like I said, you can go to the Seattle Police Department Twitter. That's where we found the link right here to this. I'm sure it's a few other places on the city websites. But SPD seeks community feedback on draft use of force crowd management policies. Man,
and I'll let them know. I'll have a link to it in my story too. So you can go.
Yeah, let them know, and I'll tweet out Kevin's story for everybody as soon as it goes up.
As soon as I finish writing it, yeah.
So Kevin Schofield, one of the big reasons we got you on here, the wordy and nerdy, is what happened in federal court today. Now, I know with this, you didn't hear the early part of some of the argument, so we won't go too deep into this argument, that argument. But what I wanted to talk about is, I guess you could paint the picture of it, what occurred, the threshold of the suit, what Judge Jones is saying.
Yeah, so it was a crazy day in court. A lot of stuff happened really fast, and it didn't necessarily happen well. So one of the people living in Cal Anderson Park, named Ada Yeager, her attorney filed a lawsuit this morning, arguing and asked for a temporary restraining order to stop the city from sweeping the Parks Department from sweeping the camp today. And it's kind of a weird reading complaint. As you mentioned earlier, they called it, first time I've ever heard this phrase, they called it, not a protest site or an encampment, They called it a protest encampment, right? And part of the reason they're doing this is they kind of want to they want to collect together as many different potential violations as possible. So all the potential violations, sort of constitutional violations for the police or the city interfering with a protest, all your First Amendment rights, they want to be able to assert all those too. But they also want to be able to assert all the case law around homeless encampments and whether, there's some important, court case precedents around cities and governments not being able to criminalize being homeless and go and arrest people for that, and there are requirements to actually offer alternative shelter if they want to if they want to make it illegal to be somewhere, and a homeless person to be somewhere on public property. So they said, well, this is this Ms. Yeager living in this protest encampment. The city's violating her First Amendment rights. They're seizing her personal property without due process. They're uprooting and displacing her. They violated the CDC standards about not moving people around during a pandemic, and they asked for a temporary restraining order on this. And unfortunately, when they filed all this, they're supposed to, whenever you file a lawsuit against somebody, you're supposed to actually, serve a copy of that lawsuit on the people that you're suing. And they didn't do that right with the city. So by the time it got around to late afternoon, when Judge Jones, the same who got assigned to this case, the same judge who is doing the ACLU Black Lives Matter crowd control weapons suit, and as we know from that, is not scared about issuing an injunction against the city of Seattle. He's a judge on this. By the time he got around to holding a 2-hour emergency hearing this afternoon, the city still hadn't had a chance to actually write a response brief to this, right? So they argued their whole case orally, but they had nothing written and filed into the court because they didn't have time, because they didn't get served the way they were supposed to on this. So that's the kind of crazy day it's been for everybody around this thing today. The hearing this afternoon was largely around sort of this emergency motion for a temporary restraining order to stop this. And there's a standard that the courts use for this that say that the person asking for a temporary restraining order has to show 4 things, right? And this is called the Winter standard off of a case, Winter versus National Resources Defense Council. And the 4 things they have to show is, first, they have to show that they're likely to be successful in the merits of their case, that they're likely to win this case when it gets to, the end game on it. That they will suffer irreparable harm if they don't get a temporary restraining order. That the balance of harms tips in their favor. And by balance of harms, I mean, how harmful is it to, the plaintiffs to not get a temporary restraining order versus how harmful is it to the defendants, the city in this case, if there is a temporary restraining order? They won't be able to clean out Cal Anderson Park. And what does that mean, right? And then the 4th one is the temporary restraining order in the public interest? Would it be in the public interest to actually grant this? And so that was largely what the hearing was about. It was arguing those 4 back and forth. And it got a little loony at times. The plaintiff's attorney, at one point went into a little side thing about how the most important thing for Mayor Durkin right now, and his belief, was she's trying to get a position with a Biden administration. So, that is her primary motivation for all the decisions she's making about sweeping parks. And it's like, even the judge is like, no, you're not going there. Stick to the facts, stick to the legal issues. Don't go off into that. We're not going to render views on politics here. So there's a little bit of that crazy stuff here. But Judge Jones, he's an excellent judge. He is super thorough on this stuff. He listens really hard. He's a stickler for the law. So, at the end of the day, I think both sides wanted him to do what's called ruling from the bench, where, right at the end of the hearing, it's like, okay, here's how I'm going to rule. And he said, I'm not going to do that, right? I need to go read the case precedents, get the law right so that I'm making the right decision on this. There's a small chance I'll get it out tonight, but it's probably going to be tomorrow morning, for this. So that's a little weird because it means that wordy and nerdy. I know I keep going on here. It's a little weird because it means that the city could, in fact, still sweep the camp tonight. They're really unlikely to do that because that would really piss off Judge Jones, right? Because it would make life more complicated for him. And the city does so much stuff with Judge Jones. And in fact, even right now, this whole contempt hearing going on over the Black Lives Matter, crowd control stuff, like they're not going to want to piss him off. They're not going to sweep that camp tonight, but they could if they wanted to, because Judge Jones said, even though plaintiff pushed really hard to get him to make a ruling like right away, and the city, pushed pretty hard on that too. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go do my homework and make the right ruling on this, and you'll have it in the morning.
Right. And real quick, I want to continue that conversation, but somebody brought up a pretty good question that a lot of people might not know. Brendan, no BS. Why was it in federal court, not city court, due to constitutional rights violations?
Yeah. So this is a case that most of the issues are federal issues. There is one issue around there's one of the issues is around sort of Washington state constitution thing, but it's almost all federal constitutional issues, right? Which makes it more likely to be a case for federal court. But yeah, so it's all about what laws are trying to interpret. Are they state laws or city laws versus federal laws? And most of this is federal laws. So it could, I guess, potentially be in either, but these usually kind of end up in federal court.
Yeah, people have been having some good luck this summer for the most part going to federal court too.
Well, not with Judge Jones. Not with Judge Jones. He's really
the one that slapped down
he put the injunction on them, right? And he just found them in contempt.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying is that people bringing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the city.
Like
yeah.
ACLU has had a lot of luck taking it right there to the federal court. So just to be clear, my fault, Bobbie, I got you. Just to be clear, Judge Jones, by not ruling from the bench, as they call it, making a ruling right there in the court, and saying that he might issue a ruling late tonight or tomorrow morning or maybe even after, that actually, because there was no restraining order issued, then it's basically status quo. And right now, the Seattle Police Department, if they wanted to go and sweep Cal Anderson Park, they could very well do that right now because they're not being restrained. An order, and the judge hasn't issued an order. But what you're saying is that it's very highly unlikely that the Seattle Police Department, because of the relationship now they've had in this contentious relationship in front of Judge Jones, that they're going to want to go over that. Real quick before you answer that, though, let me go over to Bobbie. You might be able to 2 for 1.
Yeah, so my continuation to hit to Omari's statement is if tomorrow they were to go ahead with the sweep at 7:30 in the morning and they were to collect all the belongings, let's say make arrests, and actually clear the park, and then the judge was to actually rule in favor, what does that look like? Are they able to be allowed to go back in and occupy that park? And then are there any consequences on the city?
Yeah, so there's one legal theory that says if they go clear it and they're done with that, and then the judge rules, the case is what's called moot, right? The judges can only rule on active controversies. There has to be like an active thing for them to decide. Once it's a moot case, once the thing is passed and there's not a controversy for them to decide anymore, then they basically have to just dismiss the case. So there's one legal theory that says if the city, and this isn't realistic because honestly it's going to take them like a day at least to get through and really sort of clean out Cal Anderson Park. But if they could do it in an hour and they got in at 7:30, they did it, they were done at 8:30, and the judge had his ruling ready at 9:30, then the judge's ruling would be moot because they'd be done. There's he could say you can't do this, but they've already done it, right? And it wouldn't have any practical effect of doing that. But realistically, since it's going to take them all day, if they started in the morning, whatever point, if he came down and he said, "This is my ruling," he could halt it. He could halt it right there. Would it mean that they could move back in? I don't know. That's a weird, tough question. I'm not. That may just sort of depend on the specific circumstances of that.
Right. And we're going to circle back around to potentials and next steps and everything. That's our last segment. But something else that happened today is there's occupation of a house on 11th and Denny. So there's now a house that's occupied on 11th and Denny. This is a tweet from earlier. Call for bodies to support the occupation. Protesters are occupying an empty house on northeast corner of Cal Anderson in protest of sweep. Come through. And this is over on 11th and Denny. Bobbie Stills, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, this is just down the street from my house. I saw the social media post going up. This is at the corner of Denny and 11th. And the activists actually called and left voice memos on some of the local politicians. And this is what they said. So activists in Cal Anderson community occupy vacant building while facing sweep. They demand a stop to the sweeps and housing for all. Facing an eviction notice at 7:30 on Wednesday morning, dozens of housed and unhoused activists have begun occupying a house on 1006 East Denny on the northeast corner of Cal Anderson Park. At 3:30 p.m. Wednesday, these members of the community, which has formed over the past 6 months around Black Lives Matter and homeless advocacy, dropped a banner stating housing is a human right. They're trying to evict us. Where do they expect us to go? Laminated one of the houseless activists. This has been as close to a home as that I've had in years. There aren't enough sheltered beds in the city for people like us. It's cold outside and it's almost Christmas, but there are thousands of empty spaces. Why won't they just open them up to us? So many people don't want to stay in shelters because of past traumas or because they're high barrier or accept only youth or women. A social worker who works with the homeless community also said we need to provide places where people can live independently, get back to their feet, access services, and be treated like human beings. The housing first model works, the activists continued. We've seen in academic research and real life cases, it's more cost effective, it's better for long-term recovery, and it's the only intervention that's a real solution, not a band-aid. There's a full one that we can post or add a link to for the rest of this statement. But yeah, they're calling for more people to come to the park, to come to the house. I think maybe that they are preparing for maybe if this injunction doesn't go through, that they have another piece of property to house some of the people from the park that weren't able to get into shelters.
Right. And with Justin, I don't have it, the clip on here, and also it looks like Dora has said something here that the house was bought by a developer a while back, and they're actually planning on, putting some apartments, quite a few stories here. And so, people, the demonstrators, the occupiers are, they've also invoked, gentrification or halting the gentrification. What are your thoughts on this, Kevin? This is a developing kind of story here.
Wow, I mean, this is a weird one. So, they've occupied private property now to do this, and that's a very different whole. I mean, just from a legal point of view, it's a whole different set of laws than things they do on public property, right? So, I'm just imagining the things that are going through the mind of, assuming Doris right and it's a developer owns this piece of property, what the owner of the property is thinking right now. It's like, what do I do with this, right? Should I, what is my, there's so many different concerns, like, what's the right thing to do for the community? What's the right thing to do for, this set of unhoused people who are staying there right now? What is my liability if they set the place on fire, right? And the fire spreads to nearby houses. If I didn't try to get them out of there, it's just, it's just this huge mess of issues for that. And the, under the law, the owner of that property can call the police and have the police come and remove the folks. And if they don't, then they, at some level, are liable for what happens on that property. So it's a very tough situation. And I also wonder if, it's dangerous. Is it a dangerous precedent for the activists to be doing this in that it's one thing for them to be protesting Cal Anderson Park, right, where there's a history and a culture and a tradition of protest and activism, and then to spread out to private homes surrounding that. How are the neighbors going to feel about that? Will they feel differently about that than they feel about protests and occupation of the park? I don't know. And I'll just say, I just don't live in that neighborhood. So
Yeah, no,
I'm kind of guessing from the
that's a
outside.
property issue. Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of guessing from the outside. And, and to me, I mean, it's really questions. I just don't know how the folks in the community are going to feel about that.
So there's
Right.
a lot of empty homes that are in this neighborhood that are actually being occupied by the unsheltered. They just move a little bit more swiftly under the radar. Somebody mentioned in the comments that the neighbors next door to that house have asked the property owner to demolish the house and or secure it so that people can't get in. I think this is turning into a big issue because the activists have actually rallied around some of the squatters that are inside of that house. And from what my understanding is, they've actually been trying to move some of the people that are in the park into the
house.
Yeah.
Right. And so Jesse Hickman is saying the owner of the property has been sitting in his car waiting for the police to arrive. We'll see what happens there. And someone, Nancy Elizabeth, it basically is just saying what you were saying, that there's a liability possibly that could occur. But then you've got a different point of view here from Peggy Hotez, who's also a big morning show viewer. Occupation is how El Centro, I think you want to say, yeah. El Centro de la Raza began. And so there's a history of actual occupation in Seattle. I think even Daybreak Star or something like that. So there's a history of occupying stuff.
Yeah. Daybreak Star was Fort Lawton, right? And El Centro was City Hall, if I remember correctly.
Really?
They occupied City Hall. That the precipitating event, was occupation of City Hall, which then led to the creation of El Centro.
Right, and then Peggy was talking about occupation resulting in that. Well, I mean, this is a house, so I don't anticipate a Daybreak Star there or an El Centro de la Raza. But clearly, this is, it's a situation on Capitol Hill and around this issue of homelessness that continues to escalate. And, there's a counter narrative, clearly, the activists, the demonstrators, the protesters, the advocates they're occupying. And there's a good number of other people in Seattle who see this totally different. And so, you never know. And since it's private property, who knows if that'll become a flashpoint, which in Capitol Hill is seeing far too many flashpoints. Speaking of that, we'll go to our last segment here, which is, and we talked a little bit about this, but we'll just cover it again. I saw my mom chimed in. She said, did the judge rule? No, Mom, the judge didn't rule today. Basically, Judge Jones said he was going to sleep on it. But I'll pitch this back to you. And you can just go over it one more time, what the judge said and what you feel the next steps are, at least coming out of the federal court, Kevin. And then we'll go to Bobbie.
Yeah, Judge Jones is a great listener. He listens super hard to both sides and in fact, at one point he recessed for 20 minutes so the two sides could actually talk for the first time. The lawyers of two sides, this went so fast today, they hadn't even talked to each other before this hearing started with the judge, right? That's how weird and crazy this day was. He gave them 20 minutes in the middle of the hearing to go confer to see if they could at least agree on what should happen overnight. And they couldn't agree on what happened overnight. So at the end of the hearing, judge said, okay, I'm not ruling from the bench. I'm going to, I've got research to do tonight to make sure I understand the case law around this and I get the precedents right and the ruling right. You'll probably have my ruling first thing in the morning. Maybe a slight chance it'll be late tonight, but it's probably going to be in the morning. And he didn't give any hint as to which way he was going to go with the ruling, that's classic Judge Jones. He really doesn't telegraph his pitches. He wants to go off and do his homework and get it right. But he's excellent. He's super, super thorough. It's going to be, when he puts out his ruling, it's going to be smart and thorough and sensible. And I actually don't know which way he's going to rule on this. We'll see. But we'll probably have that first thing in the morning. And if he if he says that if he denies a temporary restraining order, then the city will be, Parks Department will be free to kind of move in and start doing their cleanup. It sounds like with the amount of additional activists who shown up in the park and the amount of extra barricading they've done there from some of the pictures I saw, it's going to be, quite the endeavor. It's going to be tough for parks, and it's going to be very confrontational. I mean, I worry about the confrontational part of this. I think this is one more case where, as a city, we're not good at de-escalating things, right? We have a confrontation.
Tell me about it.
And we don't, how are we supposed to de-escalate this? As a community, right? As just the, Capitol Hill community, as, the community of people who care about what's happening to our homeless neighbors. How do we, I just, personally, that weighs very heavily on me, right? This is going to be really confrontational. And even if the judge rules in favor of the plaintiffs on this, which, is going to be an amazing legal precedent because of this whole, protest encampment thing. If he goes that way, the city will almost certainly appeal if he does. And that will tie up for a long period of time. But, there was, that won't stop Cal Anderson from being confrontational. It'll still be confrontational. It'll just be a different set of people, or, a slightly different set of people who are angry about it.
Right. Bobbie Stills, if the city prevails in Judge Jones' court tomorrow morning, and the protesters, the homeless advocates, and Ms. Yeager there lose, man, what does it look like? Kevin kind of talked about it in a broader sense, but what does it look like for parks and police to actually enter there and sweep that park? I mean, people are entrenched.
Yeah, I went inside the barricaded area earlier, and they fortified themselves pretty well. I know there's a lot of activists that are still coming in, and I'll reiterate Kevin's sentiment, and like, it's dangerous on both sides for both parties, and people are willing to go to jail for this. They care a lot about the community. They care a lot about these issues, and they're willing to be arrested for them. So you're gonna have to drag them out of there and or arrest them. They're not gonna give up without a fight. But it's dangerous inside. It's dangerous once you get inside of there. People are corralled. So I'm not looking forward to what that's going to look like. So I really am hoping that there can be some kind of resolution or something happens, because these activists aren't going anywhere. They've expanded. They've taken over a house just right at the north end of the park. They mean business. So and this is on parks to go in there. This is their piece of land, and they're going to send the police in there, and we've seen what the confrontations look like between the police and the activists, and I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah, Kevin brought up something real interesting, and I don't know. I won't claim to know when with some of the nonprofits that are dealing with the homelessness, if there is specialists in de-escalation, that would be a good investment for the city as a whole, because so what happens here is Parks goes over there. They're like, man, we can't get in. The police come with an objective, and they're just like, man, okay, we're just clearing these people out. I don't, man, who's there in between Parks saying, hey guys, can we come in? And they'll be like, no, leave. And then the police come in. You know what I'm saying? Where's that layer that's there? I take it back to the Western Barricade. Where was, man, if there was a team of de-escalators, who knows how everything would have played out. But in some situations, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes on the Western Barricade, it was protesters who came in there and said, hey, nah, we're going to stay 6 feet. We're going to stay 3 feet or whatever. And you saw a difference there when it was people whose whole role was like, man, how do we bring this down? How do we communicate? Right. And the city hasn't really been good at having a de-escalation kind of component there. And we see, like I said, what we're most likely going to see, no matter what, depending on the timeline, is that Parks is now going to turn this problem over to the Seattle Police Department. And the Seattle Police Department is going to do what they do. And and also the bigger problem, as we see, is not going to be solved. The last two sweeps, people were back in
Yeah.
4 hours, 6 hours.
So let me just throw this out too, right? Where are city leaders? Where, what are elected officials
Say it.
doing, right? The
Mm.
mayor, the city council, right? City attorney, our 11 elected officials for the city. Where are they, right? Councilmember Mosqueda, put out a statement. Okay, she put out a statement, and it says that, she has concerns about it, right? Okay, she has concerns about it. But like, where's the leadership here? I mean, I'm just gonna, I guess vent a little bit here on this, but like, seriously, like, where is the leadership to de-escalate this and find a solution that actually, gets us out of this without a bunch of people getting hurt and a bunch of people getting arrested? Where is it? I'm not seeing it tonight. I haven't seen it all day. Have you guys seen it? Am I being unrealistic to say, hey, elected leaders, where the hell are you?
We
No,
said the same thing on the Western Barricade.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I think the city would have a lot of different results with the parks department if instead of having 100 police officers with shields and riot gear going there, they had 100 parks employees or 100 caseworkers or just 100 city officials walk in there with pens and papers and go up to each homeless person and try to identify the issues that individual is facing, and then trying to address those issues instead of sending in the police officers. And I think that's where the activists and the protesters have an issue.
But I mean, the thing is, and I know it's this and it's COVID and all kinds of other things. So, but the only elected official that we saw on the ground doesn't even represent that district, and that was King County Council member Gamai Zahalai. Represents a marginalized population, the Central District, the South End, and Skyway. That's the only person that we visually, saw there on the ground. And you're right, we saw one a statement come out from Mosqueda, and a statement is better than no statement. But I mean, it's yeah, exactly. This is something that we were saying way back during protests and everything else. And I think that what we find here in Seattle is there's a lot of elected leaders and community leaders who are scared to put themselves in harm's way. And I'm not talking about harm's way like flashbangs and tear gas. They're scared to put themselves in political harm's way. They're scared to put themselves in political harm's way, or they just come very bombastic and over the top and just polarize the conversation. Whatever happened to elected officials being able to just have normal conversations with people, and not be all this super hype and everything else. And I hate to sound cliche-ish, but we said it there on the Western Barricade and Chaz and Chop. It's like, man, there's too many gatekeepers. Where are the bridge builders?
Yeah.
This is a bridge that definitely needs to be built. And we see it coming. This is a catastrophe that's coming. Where's the bridge builders downtown?
And going into a year where there's going to be a wide open field for mayor, right? With no incumbent, you would think someone would see this as an opportunity. Like, if somebody went in and actually solved this, what a great advertisement for being mayor, for running for mayor. Like, hey, look, I can bring people together and actually solve a problem, and nobody gets hurt, and everybody gets what they need. Right?
That's what I'm saying. That takes courage, though, Kevin. And we haven't seen a lot of that. Somebody has to be able to take a risk. It might not work out the way that they want, but man, who's gonna actually have that courage to be like, you know what? I'm going to sit up here and try to make this difference. And yeah, I don't see it.
I think that there's a lot of issues surrounding this thing, and you're not going to be able to please everybody. And
No,
I agree. I agree with Omari that it takes bravery and courage to go in there and take criticism from all different angles. That's the kind of leadership we need, and I'm just not seeing anybody step up. So if you're out there, feel free to come
step up. Please step up. Elected officials, if you're out there listening, please step up.
Please step up. All right. Well, I think that's a great message to leave everybody with. Kevin Schofield, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Bobbie Stills, the postman. As usual, you deliver. Thanks for delivering the information. We're back on air tomorrow at 11 a.m. for the morning update show. So Kevin, I think you already answered this, right? But so last night, because Bobbie lives right next to Cal Anderson Park, I slept over. We slept over at Bobbie's house. You know, he was on.
You guys had a sleepover and you didn't invite me? Man.
He got smoked in Street Fighter.
You know, played Twister and all this other stuff based upon.
Okay, now I can't unsee that now. I can't unsee Omari playing Twister. Okay, really, that was not an English I needed.
He's flexible.
Believe me, I can barely twist up in this studio. But considering what happened down there in the federal courthouse and Judge Jones. Is it safe for me, would you say, I'll just go home tonight, or do I need to crash over there, Bobbie Stills, because there might be an early morning raid?
I don't think it's gonna be like a 7:30 a.m. thing. I don't think Judge Jones is gonna get it out before, you know. Honestly, I really don't think the city's gonna go in before Judge Jones rules, right? I mean, it would be insanely stupid for them to do that, right? Unless like, you know, they would go in if I don't want to say absolutely never. They would go in if there was a gang shooting incident in Cal Anderson Park tonight. They'd go in. They'd say, okay, fine. You know, this is an intolerable situation. We cannot let that stand. We have to go in and intervene right now with this, right? If it was that kind of life safety, situation, they'd do that. Short of that, I can't imagine them going in before the judge rules on this. It would just be, can you imagine being Judge Jones, waking up tomorrow morning saying, yeah, okay, I got about half an hour to dust off that thing, and then pulling up the Seattle Times or the morning news and saying,
Converge Media.
Converge Media, and saying like, they swept the park at 7:30 this morning. Well, I'll just tear that up because that doesn't mean anything anymore. Like, he'd be so pissed if they did that.
I think what you're saying then is, in that case, Bobbie, man, I'll catch you tomorrow on the morning update show. I'm going to get some good sleep tonight because I didn't sleep last night. Again, Kevin Schofield, thank you so much. Bobbie Stills, appreciate it. Kevin, thank you for your support of Converge. You know, Kevin's got that great Converge sweatshirt on.
I got the swag.
Appreciate you. Yeah.
You gotta get hats. I need a hat.
Hats are next. They're on the way. Peace.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your man, the Big O. Want to take a moment here, first of all, to say thank you for your support of Converge Media. We definitely wouldn't be here without you. Secondly, I want to thank everybody who is a supporter of Converge Media on Patreon. We definitely appreciate your support. And for those of you who might not know, I'll let you know, we operate 100% off of donations. Some donations big, most donations small, but we love all donations all the same. If you haven't done so yet, I want to encourage you to go on our website to whereweconverge.com/donate and subscribe. You click on the Patreon link and you can subscribe for as little as $5 a month. There's higher tiers beyond that as well. And just know that your subscription literally keeps us on the air. Once again, I want to thank you for all your support.